This is the mop-up. On June 2nd, 2023, President Biden delivered an address from the Oval Office on the national debt. Here is the speech Joe Biden should have delivered. My fellow Americans, one word describes the story of this country: more. More land, more freedom, more people, more wealth, more democracy, more. There's nothing wrong with more if you're able to answer the question, more of what? What do you want more of? This week, my Republican colleagues and I negotiated a debt ceiling bill that preserved Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. We gave more to our military, but we gave less in food stamps. To prevent a default, I agreed to throw as many as 170,000 Americans off food stamps. I didn't enter politics to do that. As president, I am forced to make difficult decisions, and I did something I will regret to my dying breath. I passed a budget on the backs of our nation's neediest. I am ashamed, and I'm not asking for your forgiveness. Instead, I will, moving forward, try to earn your forgiveness. And of course, my Lord and Savior's forgiveness, who is looking down on me right now and saying, Joey, all those years in Catholic school must have taught you nothing. Tonight, I sign this new debt ceiling bill into law. The national debt will not be an issue until January of 2025, after I sign this bill into law. And so I would like to now use that time to begin a conversation about money, how we spend it, and on whom. As president, I am given extraordinary powers. With the press of a button, I can destroy the planet. Because of emergency powers granted to me by Congress, I can lock anyone up and destroy anyone's life. And yet, despite all those powers invested in me, I lack the power to act unilaterally to improve the lives of my fellow citizens. Yes, I can excuse all student loan debt with the stroke of a pen, but that would end up challenged in the courts. There are laws that allow me to help anyone living in an environmental disaster zone by putting them on Medicare no matter what age. But my power to improve your lives is limited by the courts, Congress, the Constitution, and most importantly, the political will of the American people. Now, my job as president is to read the polls. And while I see that this country leans towards a more progressive government, it doesn't lean quite hard enough. And that's where I need your help. I need the political will to move us in the right direction. Medicare for all makes sense, but polling shows the American people are only in favor of Medicare for all once it's been properly explained to them. Most Americans favor increases in Social Security. They favor free tuition at all public universities. They want free universal daycare. They want us to raise the minimum wage to a livable one. Most Americans want the wealthy to pay a greater share of the taxes. Most Americans want our government to spend less on police and prisons and more on what makes police and prisons unnecessary. That's what most Americans believe. It says so in the polling, but only in a special kind of polling, a polling where it has been first explained to them. And so, my fellow Americans, I need your help. Until now, in January of 2025, I need all of you to spend 1 hour each day to focus on your finances and our country's. And what I need you to understand is that your finances are nothing like your government's. I need you to wash clean from your mind the lie you've been fed, that the government, like a family, must live within its means. That is a lie. That is a lie spread by the wealthiest people in America who don't want to pay taxes. And because they don't want to pay taxes, they want the government to cut spending. Because if the government cuts spending, it won't ask the rich to pay their fair share of taxes. Now, here's the important thing you need to understand. The wealthiest people in America who control both parties and all the economists and the universities where they teach, they say they want a balanced budget, but they really don't. If America balances its budget or runs a budget surplus, that means our Treasury Department stops issuing bonds. You see, when we run up a debt like the $33 trillion debt we owe right now, that means we issue $33 trillion in Treasury notes. And rich people, along with institutional investors who invest for rich people, they buy those Treasury notes because those notes pay interest and they're guaranteed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. I am signing this new debt ceiling bill tonight mostly to signal to the world that a United States Treasury note is one of the safest places you can put your money. Thanks to the 14th Amendment, America will never default on our debt. The wealthy want us to be in debt because they want a safe place to put their money so they can collect interest on it. And that's the difference between your government and your family. The economy will not grow unless the government has debt. And unlike your family, the government pays its debt by forcing everyone in the country to pay the government each year on April 15th. Government finances are nothing like family finances. Families go bankrupt. The U.S. government does not. Families have no guarantee that money will be coming in. The U.S. government does. So stop thinking the government must live within its means. The government can print the money it doesn't have. You and I and everyone else can't. So now that we know the government is completely different from a family, let's talk about our $33 trillion debt. Too much debt is a bad thing. Well, where did this debt come from? $7 trillion of it came from Donald Trump's tax cuts for the rich. The rest of the debt, well, that came from George W. Bush's tax cuts for the rich and Ronald Reagan's tax cuts for the rich. We were lied to, and we're still being lied to by Republicans who claim lowering taxes for the wealthy will balance budgets because the wealthy will create so many jobs, our Treasury Department will be overflowing with new income taxes. We gave that a try since Reagan took office, and all those tax cuts did, all Reagan's tax cuts, all George W. Bush's tax cuts, and all Donald Trump's tax cuts did is increase our debt to $33 trillion. The truth is, wealthy people don't create jobs with their money. The truth is they hoard it, buying Treasury notes. Whether you like it or not, the government creates jobs by pouring money into the economy through tax credits, entitlement programs, and government contracts. I can assure you, my fellow Americans, there is not a single so-called self-made billionaire who didn't make his fortune through some sort of government subsidy or government contract. The very same people who demonize government spending are the very same people who benefit from its largesse. Think of all the Republicans who voted against my student loan relief bill while they themselves were the recipients, the beneficiaries of Paycheck Protection Program loans that they never had to pay back. So, My fellow Americans, what is an economy? An economy is a battle among special interests, all fighting for a slice of government spending. It is a battle among special interests fighting over how expensive or how cheap the Federal Reserve will make it to borrow money. And in this glorious struggle, all sorts of special interests fight it out in the public square, making their case for why they deserve the government's largesse. That's how a democracy is supposed to work. But the American democracy, it doesn't work. And our economy doesn't work, at least not for everyone. So why is that? Because the one voice not heard in this epic struggle for government largesse is the American citizen. The people who work and vote and pay their taxes don't have anyone speaking for their fair share of the pie. As you all know, I am not a Marxist, but I do not believe in a free market. Free markets don't exist because all markets are manipulated by the rich and the powerful, and the easiest way to manipulate the market is to control the government. Those who control the government control government spending. And so we have now reached a point where the government is in the control of the rich, which means the tax code and government spending is dictated by the rich. How else can you explain this budget deal I'm about to sign, where poor people must work for food stamps, but children of billionaires can inherit their first $20 million without paying a single cent in taxes? The conversation about government spending has been contaminated by economists and politicians who are paid mightily by the richest 1% to lie about so-called government handouts. It is a lie that food stamps makes people lazy. It is a lie that welfare programs create a class of people who'd rather sit on the couch than go find work. The rich don't believe that free money destroys the work ethic. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend billions rewriting the tax code to make sure their idiot children never have to work a day in their life. It is obscene for Speaker McCarthy to insist that making people work for food stamps will give them a sense of self-worth. Jobs are no guarantee of self-worth. As a matter of fact, most jobs strip us of our self-worth so we don't ask for a raise. Self-esteem isn't found only in our work or our net worth. Sometimes it is found in our family, an art project, or a garden that nobody even knows about. In the end, the economy is what we say it is. Jobs and salaries are based on what we value as a society. I keep a bust of Robert F. Kennedy in my Oval Office as a reminder of what this country is supposed to be. Robert F. Kennedy was a mean son of a bitch. Born to immense wealth, he never had to work a single day in his life. But he worked. He was ambitious, driven, made enemies, and early on in his career, when it came to politics, he was a street fighter. He never had to worry about food, housing, or education. It was all handed to him by his rich father. And that freed him up to fight the world. Early on, he fought the wrong fight, siding with Joseph McCarthy and ruining the lives of American communists. Or when he took on the Teamsters, who at the time were no more corrupt than the companies whose freight they carried. But the fire was in his belly, despite all the inherited wealth. All the handouts he received from his rich father didn't dull his ambition. And then, after his brother, President Kennedy, was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy underwent a profound transformation. In his final years, he learned that all Americans are ambitious, no matter how much or how little they are born with. Because in America, we all want more. We all want the moon. Rich or poor, we all want the moon. Bobby Kennedy realized that free food, free education, a social safety net doesn't make a person dependent, it makes them stronger. In his final years, Bobby Kennedy visited Appalachia, went into the shacks and saw the children, American children, with bloated bellies. He marched with Cesar Chavez and the people who pick our food. And he saw that everyone deserves a handout. Everyone deserves a warm meal, a home, an education, because it makes them stronger, not weaker, stronger. And by making the least among us stronger, it makes our economy stronger and all of us safer. This country, America, has been taken over by the greedy. It started when Ronald Reagan was inaugurated. As I said at the beginning of my speech, America can be defined by the word more. But we are also being run by rich people who want more money than they need. That is sick, because for them, enough is never enough. They have poisoned our government, our environment, our jobs, and our lives. There is nothing wrong with wanting more. Our country was built by people wanting more. My ancestors came to America for more, but enough is enough. Let's remember why we have a government. We have a government to protect all of us, not the richest 1%. We pay our taxes to protect everyone, especially the least among us. Children, the elderly, the unlucky, people born with physical or emotional difficulties. That's the only reason we have a government. The scriptures teach to look after the poor. So why are we punishing them? Between now and the next debate over the debt ceiling in 2025, let's reimagine an American economy and a government that focuses on the bottom. Let's make rock bottom soft enough so all of us can bounce back. Otherwise, what is the point of government, or for that matter, any of us being here? That's the speech Joe Biden should have given on June 2nd, 2023.
You're listening to The David Feldman Show, you happy, self-actualized hump.
Paid to piss people off. Go by Paid to Piss People Off. It's the new trilogy written by the Reverend Barry W. Lynn. It's published by Blue Cedar Press. It has the Feldman Guarantee. Tonight, we're talking peace. It's a trilogy of 3 books, and one of the books is entitled Peace, and we're going to talk about the Reverend's protests throughout his career. I should mention to our new listeners, I don't know how it's possible that anyone doesn't know who the Reverend Barry W. Lynn is, but in case you've been in a coma, the Reverend Barry W. Lynn, for nearly a quarter of a century, ran Americans United for separation of church and state. Why? Because he's not only an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ, he's a lawyer, and he wants to keep religion out of the public square. Welcome, Reverend Barry W. Lynn, author of Paid to Piss People Off. We have kicked the can down the proverbial road when it comes to the budget ceiling. We will not be discussing the budget ceiling until January of 2025. There doesn't seem to be money for anything. People have been thrown off food stamps, cut, except one segment got a bump in pay? Who was that?
That would be the United States military, not necessarily a payment for the people who are serving, but for the military hardware that is seen by some as essential. And this is where I think last night's debate in the Senate got really mixed up. Rand Paul a few days ago said, it's time for Republicans not to treat the defense budget as a sacred cow. And, of course, the other people who have historically, and he voted against the deal last night, as did Elizabeth Warren and Bernie, and I believe Ed Markey from up here in Massachusetts.
But for different reasons, all for different reasons.
For different reasons. But they did agree, I think, we can know this, that the extra money, the 3% guaranteed increase in defense spending was one of the things that even people like Rand Paul and certainly Bernie and Elizabeth Warren opposed. They thought this was too much. And this is the golden opportunity that was missed. Why didn't Bernie or Elizabeth Warren go to Rand Paul and say, look, we're going to vote on these proposals. And they did vote on a couple. But let's have a discussion for 3 hours. We'll do an hour and a half. Republicans, that is at least Rand Paul, why we're against spending so much money on the military, and then we'll come up and we'll talk about why some Democrats oppose it. That would have been an enlightened event. This would have been much more valuable to listen to than the goofy speeches that were being made. This was where Lindsey Graham, who I'm beginning to think is literally the worst person in the entire United States Senate.
Or take out the word Senate.
Yeah, in Earth, Earth, and possibly, although I don't believe there are aliens in outer space, but let's say maybe as bad as anybody on any other planet. He voted against it too because they didn't have enough. Now we do know that he kind of cut a deal, at least with McConnell and probably with Schumer too, that in the event that they have an opportunity to come back to the defense budget for some additional appropriations in the fall, they will do so. I would love to see a debate, a discussion by people who think that this bloated defense budget must be curtailed from the right and from the left, and have it in public, because there's no other way it's going to get done. You are never going to see CNN devoting an hour special. The two that I noticed they're doing now, a special on the Bee Gees. I have a huge music collection. It doesn't contain a single album by the Bee Gees.
You don't like the Brothers Gibb? I love the Brothers Gibb.
No, it's irrelevant.
Okay.
I'm not
going to argue with you.
Yeah, don't argue with me about this.
This is another argument I can win, so go ahead. I don't want to embarrass you.
No, and then, of course, I think the other one they're promoting has something to do with, is this the most dangerous year for mountain climbing on Mount Everest, because there are a large number of deaths. That being said, I honestly think CNN ought to get military personnel experts together for 1 hour and just kick around the questions that, in a sense, we didn't even address last week, because then we would get a better bead, and it would begin to be part of the discussion that the non-existent Bernie plus Rand Paul talking about the defense budget that didn't happen last night. It would be a start.
Now,
and I think it would be as interesting, notwithstanding it, you love the Bee Gees, you have all their records, I'm sure, but I think it'd be more valuable for the country and just as entertaining and engaging if they had a debate about military manpower.
Who do we see whenever we have military experts on CNN? Who do we see?
We see retired members of the military.
And who are they working for?
Well, they're usually working for some defense contractor now that they've left the military. So it is the most incestuous collection of people you can find. And there are other people. I mean, there are civilians and there are people who were in the military who've devoted their entire lives to checking on issues like personnel, weapon systems. What's good? There's even an organization called the Center for Defense Information that has a lot of former people who are very skeptical, former members of the military, very, very skeptical of the claims that the Defense Department has made historically and that they're still making today.
Now, you have lived in Washington, D.C. most of your adult life.
I have.
When you go up against people on CNN, did they reveal that they were lobbyists? And should they?
No. I think they should. I don't think it's up to them. I think it's up to CNN and MSNBC and anybody else that has them on to say so-and-so was the former lieutenant colonel in the blah, 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 and now works for Raytheon. So
when we see David Plouffe, David Axelrod,
yep.
When we see Gibbs, Joe Lockhart, these are Clinton and Obama press secretaries. They're always identified as the former press secretary for Bill Clinton.
That's right.
They don't mention that they are paid K Street lobbyists for the industry that stands to benefit from the issue they're talking about.
That is absolutely correct, and they should be. They should. It is irresponsible journalism to have these people on virtually every night, as CNN does about what's going on in Eastern Europe, and not reveal who in the heck is paying their salaries. And it's just irresponsible.
Before we go back to defense spending, lobbying, being a lobbyist on K Street, is not just walking the halls of Congress or walking through the White House. You can lobby the White House as well,
of course,
and the federal agencies. It's also going on television. Part of lobbying is lobbying the American people.
There's no doubt about that. Absolutely. And in fact, that is what I remember there was a tiny issue with the pharmaceutical companies where I was actually in support of the pharmaceutical companies. And I gave a bunch of speeches before I moved up here. I think they paid me $1,000 a speech to talk at a breakfast about why the regulation of advertising of pharmaceuticals should not be heavily restricted. I finished the speech. Whoa, wait a minute. Let's get to the merits of that in a minute. But this is the end of the story. So a guy from the pharmaceutical industry stands up. It was a good speech. And he said, we would have to pay this man $1 million a year to get him to work for us, which, of course, I would never do because it was a tiny little thing.
So this is interesting. We in the Church of Feldman, which we still haven't.
No,
you keep promising.
I know,
but we do confessions. So you did lobby the American people on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry, saying that there's nothing wrong with advertising drugs on national television.
Yeah, I mean, they were advertising them already, and I wasn't so much talking to the American people. I was just talking to the industry itself to tell them how to frame issues and respect the legitimate corporate First Amendment interests that companies do have, whether we like it or not.
Now, looking back, is it possible, with all due respect, and by all due respect, I mean...
You mean very little, but yes.
Don't you think that one of the reasons we don't have Medicare for all in this country is because the pharmaceutical companies and the health insurance companies, well, this is about the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, it is.
That they advertise on the news networks and chill the conversation?
I don't think it's the principal reason we don't have Medicare for all.
Well,
I think the principal reason we don't have Medicare for all is that people do not look at Medicare, particularly those of us who are on it, and see that it's giving us everything that we deserve, or even close to it. And in fact, if you don't cover eyeglasses and you don't cover hearing aids and you don't cover the things that most people desperately need, there are only one of two things you can do. You can do what they did with hearing aids, which is to make them available over the counter, reducing by 90% what most people are paying for it. And, you know, the glasses, and it's insane.
So you have done hundreds of thousands of television shows. And this is an but as a spokesperson,
I've done a lot.
You've done a lot of debating. Yep. You've answered the tough questions, and this is an example of you deflecting away from. That was very good. I mean,
really,
yeah, that was great. But on the David Feldman show, I put people in the hot seat.
That's exactly why I like to be here.
And you're in the hot seat, yes. Reverend, and you didn't answer my question. Do you feel personally responsible for speaking out in favor of advertising pharmaceuticals on television? Do you think that played a significant role in dumbing down the conversation about the war against Big Pharma?
No, I really don't. I just think that the advertising of drugs and new drugs and drugs that no one ever heard of, and that you're supposed to go and ask your doctor, I don't think those are not bad questions, frankly, to be asking. If you see a new drug on the market and you're curious about it, it's good for you to ask that question of your doctor. And the fact that it's a pharmaceutical ad from which you learn that of the existence of the drug, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that.
Okay.
But someone in the chat, I noticed, made a reference to my wife. What did she think of that?
Hey, believe her out of it.
It was not Ted Cruz.
Oh, okay.
But I'm glad you mentioned this, because I wanted to ask you a question.
Me?
Yes. I did. I wanted to ask you a question. I wanted to put you in a seat. Let us say that last night you were in the United States Senate. You had been appointed to be a senator from Arizona, because I don't know who that really is. And you had an opportunity to make a 10% cut across the board, including a 10% cut in the defense budget. Would you have voted for that or not voted for that?
I don't know enough about this. So you're saying, would I vote for a 10% cut in the defense budget?
Yes.
Are my constituents morons who would think I'm weak on defense if I did that?
It doesn't matter. You're only there temporarily.
Temporarily?
You've just been appointed. That was the predicate. You were appointed. You're not running for anything.
And I'm not going to run for re-election.
You're not going to run for re-election.
I'm just going in.
You're just going in. They give you a 10% cut in the defense budget. Do you do it?
How much money am I worth, and am I going to need work on K Street after I leave?
Yes, you're as good as I am about deflecting
well, I just want to know who I am. Do I need money? Do I need to do favors?
You don't need any more money than you make from the wealth that you're accumulating from doing this program, and you will acquire when you set up the Church of Feldman.
Okay, but I'm a United States senator.
Yes, it's 10% cut.
And I'm only going to be there for...
Lindsey Graham wants a 6% increase. He only got 3%. He voted against the bill. Would you have voted for a proposal to cut 10% out of the defense budget? Yes. Good.
Yes.
Question, why doesn't every progressive at least do that? At least cut 10% out of the bloated defense budget.
Let me answer your question, Reverend, with a question.
Right. Okay.
In order for Finland to be welcomed into the warm embrace of NATO, it must spend, I think, 2 to 3% of its GDP on weapons.
Yeah.
So I've always been told you can't throw money at a problem. That's what conservatives say. That you should spend money in a conservative fashion. But when it comes to defense, you have to throw 2% of your GDP every year at the military-industrial complex. You have to spend it. It's like, in a corporation, you're given an expense account, and you go on a trip, and you got to spend it. Even if it means, that you're going to blow it on strippers, or the strippers are going to blow it on you. But it's so flagrant, isn't it? It's just.
Of course it's flagrant. Of course it's ridiculous.
How do we get in on this? How do we get to a guaranteed skim of a GDP?
You don't unless you form the Church of Feldman. Then you'll be able to do that. Then you'll even be able to get, the next time we have a pandemic, you'll be able to get loans that will never have to be repaid for running the Church of Feldman and having all of your friends, children, and associates.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
About Peace, your book.
Peace, yeah.
Which is part of Paid to Piss People Off.
Right.
Years ago, I used to smoke dope.
Okay.
And when I combined the dope with the right amount of scotch, I would see things clearly. Right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about defense spending and the greed of the military-industrial complex, it reminds me of this crystalline understanding of the immorality of our defense industry. It reminds me when I used to smoke dope and drink, and you go, oh my God, I get it, I see it. And now it's just so out in the open and clear that this is about, like, Ukraine is about profits. It's the defense spend. It's not about keeping. They just lie. Do they know they're lying? Or are humans good at deceiving themselves before they deceive others?
Oh, I think they know full well that they're lying. But what is the opportunity for somebody to say, Senator Schmo, or you former Lieutenant Colonel so-and-so? Where does any of that confrontation come? Look, I moved to Massachusetts 6 months ago. I wrote an email to Elizabeth Warren about an issue about a month ago. I have yet to have any kind of response whatsoever. These are supposed to be the people most tuned in to what the public is interested in. These are the people who are supposed to be progressives and listening to people like myself. And I explained a little about my background, and I still didn't hear one word. What about, why don't you have a meeting in your local town? You know how few members of Congress ever have a meeting in their hometown that's genuinely open? They have these phony things like Sean Hannity did the other night with Donald Trump. You have a hand-picked bunch of people. They show up. Mm-hmm. You act like you're asking them hard questions, and then you don't ask them any hard questions. And Hannity last night started his questioning of Trump by asking him about the fall that Joe Biden took when he stumbled over a suitcase or something on the stage.
Right. I watched the first 10 minutes of that, and I got scared. I thought, oh, wait a second, Trump? Really? We got to go back to him again? Like, we're going to relive this all over again? He's just a great liar.
Yes, he is. And One of the things I can see we're almost out of time, but one of the things I want to know is why do I get 10 emails every day from groups associated or claim to be associated with the Democratic Party who are telling me that we're not being tough enough on Donald Trump, that we're somehow not, Merrick Garland's not moving quickly enough, the Georgia Attorney General not moving quick enough, write a letter, demand this, send us money. If we don't end up, those of us who are inclined to support Democrats, if we don't get a rerun with somebody, even Biden, against Donald Trump, we will lose the presidential race. And we'll lose it because the people that are running are just as bad as he is. Asa Hutchinson, for example, who may be foreclosed from even getting in the early debates because he's doing so poorly. But he is a horrible human being. Nikki Haley, a horrible human being. Ron DeSantis, arguably a worse person than Donald Trump. There is not one person running for the Republican nomination who thinks about any issues other than how to hurt people, how to kick people off of welfare, how to penalize them for doing things or being different than they are, and then trying to convince us that we really ought to worry more about drag shows at a library than we ought to worry about people starving to death at the border.
Why are there not more reverends like you and rabbis?
I wish I could answer that. And I've told this story before. I mean, I knew a woman who had been very popular talk show guest when she ran SIECUS, the Sex Information Education Council of the United States. When she became a Unitarian minister, she was virtually never seen again.
Have you ever, I've started telling people they're going to burn in hell.
Yeah.
Because I think it's powerful. Have you ever been tempted to say, I am a reverend and I can assure you, I've read the scriptures, you're going to burn in hell?
Yeah, I've never been tempted to say that. But, there are members of Congress that I did almost say that to them directly. But at hearings, yes.
I don't mean to. I'm being serious, and I hope I'm not.
I know you are.
So I don't mean to get too personal with you because we joke around.
Sure.
But Fugelsang is the best person to talk about this with.
Sure.
If you go over the Bible and the teachings of Christ, these people, am I wrong that these people are Satan? I mean, isn't it really immoral to hijack the words of Jesus and twist them and have him saying things that are the complete opposite? Isn't that what Satan would do?
That is exactly what Satan would do. And perhaps Satan, if you really, believe there's a Satan, maybe he's operating because he sure as hell is doing a good job of making people who allege themselves to be Christians to do every non-Christian thing humanly possible. Yes.
And so have you ever been tempted to say to these people, you are Satan? But that is what Satan would do. It is.
Yeah. It's just not the way I talk.
You know what? You have too much faith. I think
what?
I have found that when I lash out at people, it's because I lack faith. Oh. When I have faith, I'm calm. And if you have faith, Jerry Falwell's son will reveal himself as the sexual pervert he is. And so in time, if you have faith, these people will reveal who they truly are. Unfortunately, along the way, they destroy lives. I can't wait decades for Franklin Graham to be exposed. Have you ever thought, I'm going to do what they do? I'm going to fight fire and brimstone with fire and brimstone, which is the name of your next book, Fighting Fire and Brimstone with Fire and Brimstone.
Fire and Brimstone. Yeah, I'll be writing that book. The problem is the language. I was once asked by a member of the United States House of Representatives why I spent so much time trying to preserve the First Amendment instead of trying to bring people to Jesus and avoid them going to hell. And he put it that bluntly. And I said, Congressman, I have a feeling your idea of hell and mine is radically different. And he said, well, no. And then he said, no, I meant, well, and he was on a committee that had two Jewish members and one Buddhist member at the time on the Judiciary Committee. And he was, he thought nothing of basically saying to his colleagues, because they're not Christians, his kind of Christian, they're going to hell. And I finally said, this is not even an appropriate conversation to have in a hearing room in the United States Congress. When I went to him afterwards and said, you raised some interesting points. I'd like to talk to you about them privately. And he said to his staff guy, he set up a breakfast for Barry and I.
Right.
And of course, that was something like 4.5 years ago. And I have a feeling he ain't never going to have it.
Right.
I did have an interesting conversation one day, though, with a then very powerful member of the House from Oklahoma, a Republican. We had a debate out in his home state, and we were catching the same plane back. And he had one good idea, which he explained to me, which was that any time legislation is passed or proposed, it should explain very specifically what it's changing. In other words, what is altering in current law. And he said that in Oklahoma, they had passed such a statute, and he said it was a good thing for the federal government. And I said, that's a good idea. I think it was because I said that was a good idea. He said, do you want to hear a joke? I said, sure. And he said, this was right before the Y2K crisis.
I remember that.
He says, well, the Republican conference got together, Barry, and we decided what to do about Y2K. And I said, oh, what did you decide to do? He said, well, we all hope that we, in fact, flip back to 1900 because we'll all like it better that way. See, one good idea, one good joke. That's all you can expect from the run-of-the-mill Republican.
We have a hand raised from Jay. Let's see what Jay has to say. Jay? You have a question you have to unmute. Jay? Asked to unmute. Okay, this reminds me of the way we did the show before, where it's people raise their hand. You call, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Well, I tried to. The Reverend Barry W. Lynn is author of Paid to Piss People Off. It's published by Blue Cedar Press. Go buy it. Where do you want people to purchase it?
I think the easiest thing is to go to barrywlynn.com. There is a big banner about how to order it. It's the cheapest way to order it, and it avoids having to do business with certain satanic publishing empires that will go on.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about...
You're talking about Amazon? What did Amazon...
Yeah, I don't know. The book is seems to be moving up on Amazon, and I don't fully know why. Because I'd like them to see an accounting of that, because I've yet to see any revenue from Amazon.
Get it in due time. I need something from you first. I need your soul, Reverend.
Before you go,
yes,
we were debating the draft last year. And
last week.
Did I say last year?
Yeah, you said last year.
Okay.
I hate to correct you, but I had to.
And I, as you know, believe we should have a draft.
Yep.
you disagree.
I do.
And you
But
wanted
once
to,
again-
and you wanted to relitigate before you left. You said how much? Like what? How many people should serve in the
No,
military?
here's the question. Whether you get them the bad way, which of course is to bring back the draft and then the government gets to tell you to kill people you don't even know, or you can stick with the all-volunteer force with all of its problems. But before you even reach that question, you need two other questions to be answered. How many people do we really need in the United States military? If you ask people how many people are serving throughout the military today, I don't think you get 1 in 10 people who could give you anything close to the right number. And then when you say, oh, well, what about the reserves? And even a lot of people in the military, when they get out and they don't realize that they usually have another 6-year obligation in something called the Individual Ready Reserve. But then once you establish what the numbers are, then you have to say, well, what in the hell are these people supposed to do? And those are the two questions. How many people do we need, and what in the world are they supposed to do? Those are the predicates to having a sensible conversation, I think, about whether and how you acquire people in the first place.
All right.
Okay.
You win. I lose.
Okay.
Okay. The Reverend Barry W. Lynn is the author of Paid to Piss People Off. It's published by Blue Cedar Press. It has the Feldman Guarantee, which means if you buy the book and it doesn't change your life, I will reimburse you. It's just that simple. Go buy Paid to Piss People Off. I'll see you next week.
All right.
I hope. Stay out of trouble.
Only good trouble.
Before-
and I will, I can't do next Friday, but
Well, we'll do Thursday.
We'll do Thursday.
Do you know?
Sounds good.
Do you know, Reverend? Do you know Paul Provenza,
I think I've seen his movie.
The Aristocrats?
Yes.
Well, let's stay with me here for one second.
Well, I actually, I have to do another show.
Oh,
I'm not going to mention it, but I have to get on that. But Norm, I love the movie, by the way.
you love the Aristocrats.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Thank you.
All right.
Reverend Barry W.
Thank you.
Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Only stay in good trouble.
Oh yes, stay
yeah,
in.
is it-
Stay. Okay. Thank
I've
you.
got to be you and me.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye. Paul Provenza joins us. He is a brilliant comedian. You know him from hosting The Green Room on Showtime, which people still walk up to me and rave about. He is a producer and a director of The Aristocrats, the movie The Aristocrats. And Paul, I said, let's just go old school and talk about The Aristocrats because we haven't talked about it in a while, and the country has changed. So,
Yeah, I don't know if it would. I don't know how it would fly now. That's for sure. It was challenging when it actually did come out, but I'm not sure if anybody would go, "Oh yeah, everybody talking about fucking their kids. Let's go with this." I'm not convinced.
well, let me.
Just a moment in time where we squeak through there.
The Reverend Barry W. Lynn.
Yes, sir.
You helped out on the Meese Commission, right? You gotta unmute there, sir. Hang on. Unmute. You gotta unmute.
Muting. Yes, I followed them around the country when I was working for the ACLU to harass them at every point. And James Dobson, who was on that commission and of course has become now a bona fide god of the religious right, came up to me in a restaurant about a year afterwards and said, Barry, I hate everything you stand for, but I will tell you this. You destroyed every good thing we tried to do, to which I said, thank you.
Okay, so what would Jesus say about the movie The Aristocrats? You are a real reverend. You're.
Yes, I know. I think he would have. I think he would have gotten a laugh out of it.
Can I just say that at the time that the movie came out, we were quite shocked to see how many of those, websites and organizations that are will do movie reviews to make sure. Nothing offensive to Christian children or whatever. I don't know what it is. It's a bunch of those. But more than a few of them were surprisingly this is a real celebration of creativity and all that. I was really quite
and
surprised.
Child molestation. What?
Yeah, I didn't realize then that it was because maybe they were getting they felt off the hook a little bit. But I want to say something about the Mies Commission, though. Wasn't it Edwin Mies who gave speeches in front of a statue? I believe it was in I guess somewhere in the Justice Department. I don't know. And their Greek
Goddess of Justice. Yep.
Yeah, and he covered.
It was Ashcroft, actually. It was
Ashcroft. No. Ashcroft thought about covering it. Mies thought about covering it, but he didn't. And when I asked his press guy, why didn't you cover that? Because it was not only on the front page of every newspaper in the country, but it's also on the cover of book 2 of my trilogy, Paid to Piss People Off. And Ed Mies he took this thing for years afterwards. I would show the picture at speeches and I'd say, this is the famous 2 boobs photograph. Not proud of that necessarily, but it always got a laugh. And Mies was, I used to run into him occasionally. We, believe it or not, I had a mutual friend, and I was at a couple of Christmas parties with Mies. And when he lost that lawsuit at his beloved Virginia Military Institute and was required to bring women into the facility, I ran into him at MSNBC. I said, "Hey, had a big loss today, Ed." And he said, "Oh, don't worry. We'll get over it. We'll just take the whole thing private," which, of course, never happened. Kurt Vonnegut, Betty Friedan, and I did a press conference in New York City about the Mies Commission when it was nearly finished, and it was a great event. And speaking of which, go ahead.
I just did a benefit performance here at my house for the Kurt Vonnegut Museum.
Yes.
For their current project, which is to send as many copies of Kurt's banned books to as many kids in the country that want them. So I thought that was worth getting behind.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm actually, I think I'm doing the keynote at their September fundraiser when so I know those folks pretty well, and it's a wonderful operation. And I gave this speech, and Kurt says to me afterwards, "Hey, you're a good writer." And I looked at him, I said, "Thank you. Maybe I'm just a good storyteller." Maybe that's the same thing. Great. But I don't know.
Did you see the Kurt Vonnegut documentary?
Yes, I did.
What'd you think of that?
I had kind of mixed feelings about it, really. It didn't grab me in the same way. I'd seen a lot of documentaries about other people I had respect for at the time, including the second one about Leonard Cohen. And I don't know, I thought they did better. But my only experience with Kurt was that one press conference. I'd never met him before or after. But well, have fun discussing aristocrats, and I don't want anyone to think that this is the Aristocats.
No,
that's controversial.
The Billy Joel, the Billy Joel vehicle.
Yeah, but do you know when Disney decided they were going to continue in release with a lot of their early films, with the exception of Song of the South, they put warning messages in front of them, including in the Aristocats. What, who knows?
Anyway. What was that warning about? This, if you have allergies, don't watch this movie.
Yeah, I think if you can't spell Aristocats properly, you may end up watching the wrong documentary,
the wrong film. Yeah. Well, anyway, so that's. But I do have to go. But I
thank you, Reverend Barry W.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly, terrific. Thank you.
That was great. That was
Well,
great.
nice to talk with you too.
Paul
And you as
Provenza.
well.
Thanks.
Paul Provenza, it is great to see you. And you said to me, what do you want to talk about? And I said, I want to talk about the Aristocrats.
Yeah, I don't. That was so long ago. But
You said, what do you want to talk about? And I thought, do things hold up with time? A lot like I found The Sting doesn't hold up. It just.
Why do you say that?
I watch movies that I thought I was going to, love again, and I go, oh, the Sting doesn't hold up.
Is that because you already know the story, so there's no surprise elements for you in that movie?
Triple D Ghetto Blasters. It just doesn't. Does the Aristocrats hold up? Now, here's what I suspect. Okay,
I think before you tell me what you suspect, I think this is a very individual thing. I don't think it has anything to do with culture or society or media. I think for individuals, that can be answered.
Well, you just interviewed John Cleese for your podcast, I believe, and he said he is not going to change Life of Brian, that they're not going to go back and clean it up, and I suspect that the Aristocrats is funnier today than it was when it first came out. So when did the Aristocrats? It came out after 9/11. It was because of 9/11.
It came out in 2005, and it was really shocking how well received it was. I mean, we really expected, the Christian moralists to make a big fuss and blah blah blah, and of course there were one or two theater chains that made a big fuss about saying that they weren't going to show the movie and stuff like that. But basically, really, it didn't really bother too many people. I mean, I thought for sure we would have heard from, the far right or some, religious organization, whatever. But most of them really got on board. And I was, as I said, I was really surprised. There were a few Christian websites that actually gave it really good reviews saying, this is a way of bringing light to darkness and all of that kind of stuff. And I was really surprised and frankly a little disappointed.
Was there a rendition of the joke that you could not show? Did somebody do a version of it that was just so profane you said, I cannot do this?
No. There were
nobody crossed a line.
There were no lines. I mean, what could possibly have been, more vulgar than Bob Saget or Gilbert Gottfried? I mean, I can't even imagine what it would be that got cut out that was named,
Right.
But there were a couple of versions that ended up on the DVD just because we couldn't fit them in the movie. Or one of my favorites, I know he's been canceled now, but a great American, Ron Jeremy.
Yes.
Did it.
I met Ron Jeremy because of you.
What was it at the Green Room? Because he
used to come. His smell preceded him. There was. I'm sorry.
He had narcolepsy, and he would fall asleep in the middle of the show.
He had narcolepsy?
Yeah.
So he really did sleep with everybody. I didn't know he had narcolepsy.
But he did it as a kind of sing-song kind of poem, and it was actually really quite lovely. Right. And I wanted it in because it's like this is the opposite of what you'd expect from Ron Jeremy, but because it was like I couldn't cut into it. It was such of a piece that it got.
A lot of people say that he's too long. That has always been his problem. And what is his trivia? Because I revealed his big trivia at the Green Room.
Aside from being in prison now for rape.
But who did he go to high school with?
Oh, that's right. He went to high school with
George Tenet, the head of the CIA. And that was a little nugget I pulled out at the Green Room when I felt very proud of myself. Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen The Aristocrats, where could you watch it?
Oh, it's all over the place. Illegal. It's all. Just watch it wherever you can. It's on YouTube.
And the genius of The Aristocrats is It is 20, I don't know how many comedians, the best comedians, George Carlin, Saget, Gilbert Gottfried, Billy Crystal.
There's 100 comedians in it.
100 comedians all telling the same joke.
Right.
Which is a genius idea because you could never get that greenlit by a studio.
No way. In fact, when we
forget that it's a filthy joke, the idea that you're going to have 100 comedians all telling the same joke, people go, that's impossible.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of the idea behind it was, Penn and I always talked about, at the time, we had talked about it for a long time. We went back and forth about how funny would it be if we just had a string of people doing this joke. And we thought, when we started shooting it, we thought, well, we'll probably get a video that we could send to our friends, it would just be funny for us. But we kept going and kept getting more and more people. And then once Carlin signed on board, everybody was like, if he's doing it, I guess I'll do it. Although Paul Reiser was hilarious after the first screening. He was like, if I had any idea that this would actually see the light of day.
Who was the most innocent party that got violated by it? Drew Carey? Who had the cleanest act that people were shocked that they could go in that direction?
I don't know. I don't know who had the. I don't think anybody in there was real squeaky clean. Although Rita Rudner.
Rita Rudner, and how Rita Rudner, a brilliant comedy writer. She's squeaky clean. You go see her. She's like Seinfeld. Did Seinfeld do it?
Her mind is fucking. Her jokes are so strong. She's a very underrated comedian.
Of course,
her joke writing is superb.
Did Seinfeld do it?
No, he was going to do it, but then he felt like it was not too long when we started shooting. It was not too long after Comedian had come out,
right?
And he felt like, well, that's my comedy documentary. I don't want to do any others. So he didn't do it. But
who said no?
By the way, can I just say that Jerry Seinfeld was not always a squeaky clean comic.
Really?
No. He decided very early on, and I believe it was a business decision. But when he first started, he used to use the word "fuck" as a rhythm stop. Like, who the fuck are these people?
Really?
Fuck all the time. And in fact, it was actually watching him that made me go, I really, you don't have to be a dirty comic to talk the way you and your friends actually talk, In fact, there was one bit that he used to do that I loved. You remember that commercial for like Fantastic spray cleaner?
Yeah.
Or something where, it'd be across the stove, it would say grease and it would say grime on the refrigerator, and he would say, I know what grease is. I know what grime is. Grime is a very, very helpful stain because it spells itself out right in front of you. And he goes, I'm glad not all stains do that because it would be really tough to be at the laundromat and pull your sheets out and it just says "come" right across.
That's Jerry Seinfeld.
That was a Jerry Seinfeld joke, yes.
Dirty Jerry. Dirty Jerry.
But even when he was dirty, he was adorable, Right. And he made it pretty cute,
Could he have been more interesting as a human being and a comedian had he gone a little bluer, but not said dirty? Like,
I don't know, you can think of it. Yeah. Whenever I think about Jerry, I always have to think about the fact that he is a machine. He is a technician.
Right.
His joke writing is architectural and it's so well engineered and designed that I kind of feel like by him making the decision to not do anything blue or not use any curse words or anything, it kind of was one of those limitations that make art that for him was a limitation that made him go in other directions and Jesus, when whatever road he goes down, I always think to myself, imagine if Jerry was political. Could you imagine the kind of material he would be generating?
Right.
And like powerful it might be, but.
And right wing, perhaps. I agree with him on the F word. I think getting rid of the F word is a good idea. But, Bob Schimmel was absolutely filthy, but he was clean. He could talk about sex and being violated sexually, but the language he used was, is that a fair?
He didn't curse much, but he did talk about, dicks and things. And,
Yeah.
I remember one bit he used to do about how he felt all these pains in his stomach, and he was like, "This is really bad." He went to the emergency room, and the doctor pressed right over here, and it cost him $800 to fart in the emergency room.
Yeah, I remember that. Or I said to my wife, "Let's try anal sex." She whipped out a vibrator and said, "You first."
You first, yeah. What is this big dick cream? Because it can't work. Wouldn't your hand be huge?
Right. Schimmel was just, we lost.
One of the all-time greats. David out there.
What?
David talks about Schimmel as being like one of his favorite comedians.
I can't hear you. I
said, if there's any Dave Attell fans out there, you'd be interested to know, you should check out Bob Schimmel, because Schimmel was like Attell's, the lighthouse. It was like that.
Right.
I want to be.
Yeah. So let me ask you about instincts of comedians, because you are, besides being an incredibly funny comedian, you've studied other comedians. You're fascinated by comedy. And I was talking to somebody about Robert Smigel. And
well, he's one of the funniest people on the planet.
He is one of the funniest, I think. Nobody, for some reason, he gets me, right?
By the way, I begged Smigel to have Triumph in the Aristocrats, and he wouldn't do it.
Really?
Yeah, he wouldn't do it. He was really shy about it. He was really like, I don't feel like I can't be with Robin Williams and George Carlin.
Right.
And all this.
Right.
Fucking you. Are you kidding me?
Right. So here's the question I wanted to ask you about Smigel and comedy. The thing about Robert is he will go for it. Within reason, but if there's a vein to be opened and a comedic wound to just dig your fist in and start pulling out the entrails, he will just and splatter it all over the wall and make you.
That to me is what Triumph is for.
Yes.
That's for him to be able to do that.
Right.
Because I think as a person, he's not that kind of person. He's a very quiet, reserved kind of cat.
Right.
And with Triumph, of all the things that he's done, which are brilliant, Triumph to me is the most vicious, and it's absolutely hilarious. I mean, he just can say anything he wants as a puppet, which I guess is sort of the history of court jesters. You can say anything you want if you got a silly hat on.
What is the price a comedian, because everybody, a comedian pays for digging your whole hand in the wound and just pulling everything out and rubbing it on the audience's face? What is the price the comedian pays for that?
You segregate your audience is what happens. You shrink down to your crowd, which is really what every comedian should be doing. And here's the funny thing. You were talking about Seinfeld before. Seinfeld, while I do believe that it was a business decision for him to go squeaky clean, it's still very much like who he is. I mean, in personal, he'll curse and, he'll scream and yell, "Fuck you" at a Yankees game or something. But, in person, he's not, he uses that kind of language. But he's basically a very, very, inward kind of guy. I don't mean the inward's the wrong word. I'm just saying that he's not a big, brassy, over the top kind of guy. He's very subtle and nuanced. And so his material is that. And it just so happens that by him being true to himself, he can have the biggest audience possible.
Right.
But not everybody can do that when they're being true to themselves. Right. Bill Burr is a great example. There are people who either love or hate Bill Burr. Nobody's just on the fence about Bill Burr. I happen to think he's like one of the best ever. I mean, he is in a direct line. I think it goes, George Carlin right to Bill Burr. I think he encapsulates everything that we loved about Carlin. But not everybody loves Bill Burr because he's not he's not generic, and he's got points of view, and some of his points of view are really challenging. And that's what I love about him, and what I loved about Patrice O'Neal is they would say some outrageous things, but then they would break down why they came to those conclusions, and you go, I got to give that a little more thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think Burr is amazing.
I agree with you. Before you go, and we have 8 more minutes with you, and then we have to.
I want to talk about. I got something coming up on June 17th. On June 17th, if you go to Nowhere Comedy, nowherecomedy.com, you can buy tickets for June 17th. I'm doing a live green room at my home. I've been doing shows here at my house. I made a venue in my backyard. It's really cool. And on June 17th, you can only come by invitation, so you have to be in town here in LA and know me personally. But everybody else can join in on a live stream on Nowhere Comedy, and it's going to be short stand-up sets and then a green room conversation with Doug Stanhope.
Wow.
Andrist.
Oh, well, start again. I'm sorry. When you said Doug Stanhope, who else?
Doug Stanhope, Andy Andrist, Christine Levine, and Annie Letterman. And
Annie Letterman. Wow. And who else?
Yeah. Henry Phillips is going to do some songs.
Oh, my God.
So that's a killer, no holds barred.
What night of the week is that?
That is, I think, a Saturday. And we're going to do a live green room afterwards, and we're going to talk about all of those acts, with the exception of Henry Phillips. All the stand-ups have been sexually abused as children, and they do material about it. And we're going to talk about that, about doing material that's that raw and that challenging and that polarizing, and just what it's like to turn that kind of horrible shit into comedy that makes people laugh.
Okay, so let's hang on, because I want to go to this, but I'm in New York. So how do I attend?
It'll be 4 p.m. Go to nowherecomedy.com.
4 p.m. New York time?
Correct. It's going to be 7:30 p.m. LA time.
No. It's the other way around. 10:30 New York time.
You're right. I'm sorry. No wonder I never draw. It's not that I suck as a comic. I just bad at math.
You show up too early, and so how do I get to this? How do I do this?
Okay, first of all, you can go to my Twitter feed, and there's tweets with links in it there, and I'm at Paul Fidenza. Or you can go to nowherecomedy.com and go to their schedule. It's July 17th, Green Room Live. And
you're doing shows in your backyard. You are doing the Danny Thomas show. Didn't Danny Thomas live above the club that he performed in every night?
That's right. I didn't remember that.
And Ricky Ricardo, would go. He'd go to the Tropicana.
The Tropicana, right?
The Tropicana. He didn't have to. So you're literally performing in your backyard.
Yeah, we've done, most of them are benefits. Like I was telling the good Reverend, we did a benefit for the Kurt Vonnegut Museum. We just did a benefit, which was all musical comedy, and it was so great. There were 8 or 10 acts on the bill, and it flowed like crazy, and everybody was brilliant. And that was a benefit for Liz Winstead's Abortion Access Front.
Right. Lady Justice.
Lady Parts Justice create Abortion Access Front.
Right.
So we like to do them just mostly as benefits. Although I did another green room last year. I did a green room in my backyard, which was a bunch of comedians who were they talked a lot about trans issues, and one of them, this guy Max Beasley, who is hilarious. He had some material about that and was just kind of beginning his journey in actually transitioning, whatever. And I had my friend, Dr. Marty Klein, who's a sex therapist, come, and we all had a conversation about all that stuff. It was really cool. It's really fun. And I do it right in my backyard, and we feed everybody, and it's open. And is
it done on Zoom? Is that how it's done?
Nowhere Comedy goes through Zoom.
Fantastic.
and you buy a ticket, and I think it's like $10 or something. It's nothing, but I think the Doug Stanhope, Andy Andrus, Christine Levine, Annie Letterman, Henry Phillips show will be well worth it.
Well, if they're talking about being molested as children.
Yeah, because Andy, because here's the genesis of this particular night. I've been working for 100 years now on a documentary about Andy Andrus, who, with the help of Doug Stanhope, actually tracked down and confronted his childhood molester.
Yes, I remember that. I'm sorry.
So that whole thing is all about,
right.
that time and what, this guy's life, having, deal with this shit and then dealing with it in comedy and how it's affected his life. And it's also really about friends and, helping each other out and stuff. But basically it's people don't talk about this stuff. And so much of it could be dealt with if people would talk about it when it happens to them.
I recommend we have to wrap it up. I recommend picking up Doug Stanhope's autobiography. I think it came out 10 years ago. He talks about his mother and helping to shuffle off her mortal coil.
Oh, that one was just a few years ago. Yeah. He talks about helping his mother, assisting her suicide.
And I went, this guy,
it's breathtaking. And you know what? What's great about that book is, there's an audio book as well. And the audio book is like a hybrid between Doug reading the book and doing stand-up at the same time.
Right.
It's really great.
But before you go, I apologize for keeping people waiting. When we were on the green room, you told me about Doug Stanhope. Besides being like one of the greatest comics ever,
which I believe that. I believe he's one of the best in the world.
He, of a certain generation, created the template upon which everybody else now is doing business as a comedian. Isn't that true?
Yeah, he did. Before it was a thing, he was doing it. He basically turned his career into, an indie band. Indie bands would have their following and they would come and see him no matter when they were playing in their town, and they would buy all their merch and they call each other. They, I live in San Diego. You live in Ohio. I'm coming to see a Stanhope show. Can I crash at your place? And his fan base is so loyal and so
like
great.
The Dead, like the Grateful Dead.
Yes. And he did that all even before the internet, just by playing. But very early on, when the rest of us were playing comedy clubs, he was like, "Fuck this," and he started booking his own little venues and bringing his own crowd to it.
Yeah.
And they've stayed with him the whole time. In fairness, he just keeps getting better and better.
Right.
And
right.
His crowd is never disappointed when they see him. It's not
right.
like, oh, he's doing that again. It's always something new and ballsy. And yeah, he definitely created a template that everybody wishes they were.
Right. He didn't do it before the internet. He did it with the internet. We're talking about.
It actually was going on before the internet.
Really?
It was just the strength of fans going, he's in town, let's go. And, connecting with each other and stuff.
Okay.
The internet picked it up, of course. But, it wasn't like a Dane Cook thing where it all happened because of the internet. He had already been laying the groundwork.
Right. We didn't have time to talk about Chris D'Elia, the genius, the comedy stylings of Chris D'Elia. You'll have to come back and talk to me about
Chris D'Elia. Speaking of fucking kids.
We have to wrap it up. Want to come back next week? Let's sell tickets for your show.
All right, sure. I want to spend every day with you, David.
Okay. Paul Provenza. Stay with me. How do people follow you? Give out your ID.
My Twitter is @Paul Provenza. There's also an @Aristocrats Film, which is just a constant stream of some of the most vile things I can find on Twitter.
How many times have you been kicked off Facebook?
I was kicked off a number of times, yeah. Sometimes I would get kicked off of my profile photos.
I know.
Which were often medical oddities.
I know. We should do we should. Okay. We got.
I'm done with Facebook. I've been off it for like 5 years now, and I'm so glad.
Good. Thank you, Paul Provenza. I love you. Next week. Thank you, Paul.
Love you, brother.
Bye.
You're listening to The David Feldman Show. You happy, self-actualized hump.